Vidit Gujrathi coming into his game against the world number one Magnus Carlsen. This is the Tata Steel Chess India Rapid round number 3. We are at this beautiful Dhanodhanya Auditorium in Kolkata. Vidit places his bottle. It's going to be an important game for him. He just drew against Arjun in the previous round and he gets into his meditative pose. What about Magnus? Where is he? Well, in the players' lounge, you can see Magnus there, still waiting. He's not gone out there. He likes to go right on time for the game, or even maybe a few seconds or minutes late. And there you see him waiting. This is the players' lounge where all the players wait in between the games. And now Magnus finally is about to leave. You can also see Arjun Erigaisi in the players' lounge. He was maybe having a bite there, and Magnus gets to his game. Magnus Carlsen has had 2 draws in this tournament. The first one against Pragnananda, the second one against Nihal Sarin. You have the fair play check, which happens before every game, so that the players are frisked for any electronic devices. And Magnus now enters the playing area. He has the white pieces and he'll be looking for his first win of the day, because both the games against Nihal and Prag ended in draws. And he adjusts all his pieces and we are ready to go. A shake of hands. This time Magnus isn't late to the game. He was right on time. The way in which he's adjusting his pieces with those 2 fingers is interesting. Plays pawn to e4. And let's see how Vidit responds back. He plays his pawn to e5. Magnus gets off his jacket. It's 25 minutes plus 10 seconds increment. Knight to f3. Vidit is considered to be one of the most solid players with the black pieces, and also one of the most well prepared players out there. And knight f6, Berlin, is his way of saying to Magnus, I'm going to be as solid as possible. Show me what you got. Rook e1 by Magnus, and this is going to be very interesting because this is kind of a very symmetrical, equalish line where black is trying to, kill all of white's play, and white is trying for that minuscule edge, maybe a little bit of more space or slightly better development. Let's see how this shapes up. Castles, and now Magnus pushes his pawn to d4. And Vidit attacks the rook. The rook comes back to its initial square, rook e1. And Vidit offers a trade of rooks. Bishop comes out to f4. This is an interesting line, because if you now take, yes, which is what Vidit does, and queen takes, now you can't snatch this pawn, because after bishop takes d6, cd6, this is actually a very interesting line on its own as well. But Vidit tries to be solid. He goes knight e8. Magnus pushes his pawn to c3, and now Vidit pushes d5, equalizing the space. The only difference here between white and black positions is that white seems to be slightly more active, but black is catching up. Bishop goes to f5, and with it here Magnus plays queen to e3. Let's see what Vidit does. He brings his knight up to d6, and now this very interesting move h3 with the idea of g4 is what he wants to do. Vidit goes h6, and now Magnus brings his rook to the open file, rook e1. Vidit offers a trade of the bishops. He's like, more pieces come off the board, better it is for me. And Magnus pushes his pawn to g4. He's attacking the bishop. Firstly, the bishops are traded. Queen takes f4. And now you can decide between putting your bishop on g6 or h7. Maybe on g6 it defends the f7 point, which could become relevant at some point. Goes bishop h7. And now Magnus plays this beautiful move c4, because this is the only way in which white can get some play. Yes, he isolates his d4 pawn, but Magnus realizes that with his bishop coming out to c4, he will have some pressure on the f7 point. Vidit now brings his bishop back, which kind of shows that he should have played bishop g6 directly, but Vidit is saying, I have an isolated pawn to play against, should be fine. And now he brings his king to f8, just so that the rook cannot enter to e7 later on. And now queen e3 played by Magnus. Vidit is under some pressure. He goes queen d6, a nice move. Maybe f6 and rook e8 is what he wants to do, but h4 has been played. Can we play f6 now? Well, the problem is there's rook e6 and there's no time. So that's the reason why he plays here queen d7, attacking this pawn. Queen comes up to f4, defending it. And now rook e8, offering a trade of rooks. With it, very solid h5 played here by Magnus. He's trying to put some pressure here on f7 with his bishop and queen. With it, drops his bishop back. While Magnus has gained more space, he has also risked it a bit, because now you can see his pawns are on light squares and they can be attacked. Bishop b5 is a very sophisticated maneuver. It is to weaken some of the dark squares in the black camp, which is why he plays f6 now by Vidit. And Magnus is waiting now. He takes on e8, king e8, and maybe this is a small error, because I think before f6 he could have pushed b5 and then played f6. And the reason becomes clear now, because after queen b8 check, if the pawn was on b5, then a7 would not have been hanging. First bishop e2 important because the g4 pawn was hanging. Now white has two threats, to take the pawn and to attack with queen h8. The second one being more powerful, which is why Vidit plays bishop e4. And now Magnus says, I got one pawn. But Vidit is very solid. He puts his bishop on d5. These positions are not easy to convert, especially because the white king is a bit weak and the pawn on d4 is also a bit weak. He plays f5. Let's see how Magnus continues. He has 5 minutes on the clock. Vidit has 2 minutes 25 seconds. Queen b8 played. He takes on g4. And now the queen comes into the center, giving a check, attacking this pawn on g7. You have to be careful. He goes king d8. And now king h2. What a classy move by Magnus. He's coming up with his king. He just understands everything about control, about centralization. You are going to learn something here. King g3. Every piece is important in the end game. He brings his king into the game. Now Vidit plays his king to c8. And let's see if Magnus takes the pawn. No, he goes king f4. He's like, I'm actually bringing my king in. And now takes the pawn. Vidit pushes queen f7 check. And the king goes to g3. What is Vidit's answer now? Queen b3 check. The king moves back to g2. So Vidit has gotten some activity. He takes the pawn on b2. Magnus snatches the pawn on g7. It's an important pawn, because if he manages to win h6, the h pawn is very strong. So Vidit goes queen d2, defending the h6 pawn. And now Magnus, again, look at, these are the moves which are very tough, which Magnus makes it so easily. Centralization of the pieces. And now a5, pushing the pawn on the other side. This is a tough queen endgame for even very strong players. Queen d1, Vidit wants to give a check perhaps. f3, blocking this path, but also opening up the king. Queen c1, Vidit at just 1 second on the clock, and he plays queen c1. Again, queen g7 check. If you come up, it was possible, but he goes king e8. And now Magnus, can he take this pawn on b7? It might not be the best idea because it misplaces the queen. Again, queen f6, keeping the queen very centrally posted. Check. And you go king h3. King comes up to d7, and Vidit now trying to survive on his last few seconds here against Magnus. But queen e5, re-centralizing the queen. King d7, Vidit staying in that zone. King on d7, he thinks it's safe. He's like, Magnus, are you making progress? Well, f4, Magnus is pushing his pawn forward. These pawn pushes can sometimes lead to perpetual checks, but not in this case. The king is moving up, a check, and now king f5. He's also ready to give up a pawn here. Wow, this is insane. Vidit actually takes the pawn, queen takes h5, and king f6. Now you cannot trade the queens, that's losing. So he plays queen f3, and by giving up the pawn, Magnus has managed to activate his king brilliantly. Queen b8. Wow, b7 is now hanging and cannot be defended easily. So c5 played. Magnus takes the pawn. h5. It gives a check. If king e8, there is queen e7 mate. So has to go king c8, and Magnus pushes forward with a6. B takes, queen takes a6, and king c7. He gives a check, and it seems like Vidit cannot survive this at all, because now c6, threatening a checkmate here on d7 and b7. He brings his queen to c3, giving a check. King goes to g6. And Vidit now plays queen h3, stopping queen d7 check there. But Magnus is like, you are not stopping it, because take, and he liquidates into a winning king and pawn endgame. If the black king could reach here on this move, it would have been a draw, but it takes one more move and the white king stops him from coming there. Opposition for Magnus, and it's time for Vidit to throw in the towel here. He resigns. Magnus Carlsen wins his first win in this tournament, and what a grind this was. What an epic grind. Vidit, of course, is a bit confused where he went wrong, and they discuss the game. Magnus also does feel that black had his chances, but somehow couldn't really hold on. And this was absolutely some stellar play by Magnus Carlsen, especially in that queen endgame where he was making those waiting moves with the rook, with the queen, centralizing them. And I think it just shows his understanding of the toughest endgame in chess. We're going to leave you with this analysis that these two players are doing, and then to see how much interest they both have in actually analyzing and understanding. They get up from the board, and even when they are going towards the player lounge, they continue discussing. And this is really amazing to watch the two players who are very strong, talking with each other without a chessboard, trying to analyze against each other. So don't miss that. That is coming right up.
Is that an issue? Yeah, I just felt like king f4, king decides, but yeah, this is very important. Yeah, especially e5 versus e4, like still like super vivid. Like when I played this